Well, here we go. I was just thinking I haven't been live since the 18th of January. So, yeah, it's been a while. Not much has changed. I've got more pictures on the back of my, whatever that's called, wall. That's what it's called on my background. And my hair's grown. But I have been to London. So I have actually ventured somewhere physically. So, yeah, so it's been an exciting few months. And it's going to be exciting few months ahead. So hopefully everyone is feeling positive. As always on here, do let me know where you are, who you are, where you're watching from. It's an interactive thing where I just want to openly discuss things that I find interesting, I'm passionate about, and the whole world of retail, and kind of bringing that back to life, and kind of reigniting that as we move towards April the 12th and onwards. So yeah, so any thoughts, comments, anything like that, ping them in the comments. We'll openly debate and discuss things as we go on. But as I sort of put out there on LinkedIn, I literally love pop-ups. I think pop-ups are they're hugely important for people's retail strategy going forward. And I just thought it'd be really good to do kind of a session on pop-ups, really, how you pop up, what is the purpose of a pop-up, what it can do for your brand, what it can do for your activation, literally how you can do it. So I'm seeing people put in comments that they're in New York and sunny Spain, so already you're making me jealous. So please keep putting those things, because yeah, it will make me think of sunny days out there in Spain. So yeah, I've got a PowerPoint presentation. I'm not a PowerPoint presentation guy, but I kind of wanted to take us on a bit of a journey of my brain about where pop-ups are and what they kind of mean to us going forward. So yeah, bit about me. I literally, like I said, I love pop-ups. I think it harks back to my kind of visual merchandising days when I was in-store visual merchandiser. So I worked from in-store VM right up to heading up VM department. So I think a pop-up epitomizes the traditional days of visual merchandising. So they are all about storytelling. They're about creating a moment that engages the customer, that makes them excited about the product, or the launch, or whatever it is. It's like it's a stop and stare moment. So from what Windows used to be to getting people in the store and engaging with the products in store, and I think they have all that creativity, and they have all that color, and they have all of that buzz in this kind of confined moment. And I think probably, yeah, it harks back to that real thing that visual used to be, the importance of visual merchandising. And I've said on here in my sessions when I used to come on every week that I think visual merchandising is going to be even more important as we move forward. And I think pop-ups is one of those ways. So let's add this to the stream. So you should be able to see. I think I can, that way. No, I can't do it because I'm back to front. Anyway, literally next to my head, there should be a PowerPoint presentation. So actually, let's make it slightly bigger. Now I've got smaller, which is much more better. So basically how to pop up. I thought I'll just pull together my brain on how to pop up. So how to kind of pop your brand out there in various ways. So again, if you've got questions as I go along or any thoughts, please ping them in as you are kind of in there. So if you've got any questions, if you've got any references that you want to put in there, feel free to add in. I keep seeing people saying hello from various parts of the world. So it's amazing that people are tuning in from places like Paris, wonderful Watford, Glasgow, Manchester. So I'm in Derbyshire. So let's bring the global part to these lives. So I kind of broken it down really into what where, when, and how. I think ultimately a pop-up should underpin like those four things. So what is the pop-up? Where is it? When is it? And how are you going to deliver it? I've got some fantastic examples of kind of what those mean. So yeah, in terms of what the general feeling of a pop-up is that it can be anything you want it to be. And I think that is one of the fundamental exciting pieces of a pop-up. Like you can see Hunter from doing a Hunter greenhouse to a digital Nike shoebox, through to a ball pit, through to a lipstick slide, through to a cafe, to a vending machine, and all these underpin. And I think that's what the kind of thinking around a pop-up is, that there's lots of different perceptions on what a pop-up is, but ultimately a pop-up is about bringing your brand to life physically in a space. And what that is, it can be anything. And I think sometimes there's a lot of debate on what a pop-up, and there's this sort of long-held sort of thoughts on a pop-up is kind of, you just take on a shop and you put some graphics up and you put some rails in and you kind of just open a store. And I think those days of what that traditional pop-up would feel, whether you just open temporarily for Christmas or those kind of traditional, like those temporary trade-in stores, that kind of era of the pop-up has massively changed. And now it's around, obviously we use the word experience a lot, but ultimately whatever you want to do with that space, you can do. And as you can see from these kind of examples, whether it's a cafe or a space planet or like a giant pink ball pit that adults jump in and kind of create a selfie moment, ultimately what you want to achieve, like what is that? It can be anything. So kind of where is your pop-up? And again, this underpins literally everything in terms of what the joy of the pop-up, why I love a pop-up. And I think the pop-up has huge benefits, especially with how we've become as a society, how we've become localized. I know we've talked about that before, but how we've kind of become much more harbored around our own locality, how we've got used to being outdoors more. I think that will be another big thing for this summer, how we're exploring our local areas, our parks, our beaches. I think as we're going to be a bit more focused on being in the UK this time, I think that whole piece around being where. So from beaches, why not put a H&M beach pop-up on a beach, for example? Why not take your store like in a van around? Why not deliver it in a car park? You know, wherever you want, wherever you feel your consumer, wherever a consumer is going to be, you can now take your store to the consumer, and that's what a pop-up does. So whether it's within a department store, whether it's a pop-up in a store, whether it's a pop-up in one of your brand's own stores. So, for example, you pop up within your own retail environment, but you create something different. Whether you pop up in the middle of a city centre, whether you pop up in a window, for example, whether you pop up in a villa in a beachside location or holiday destination, so you're taking your brand to where the people are going to be, whether you pop up in a disused store in a new location, it kind of, wherever you want to be, wherever you feel like the brand needs to be, pop-ups can ensure you do that. When, again, ultimately it's around timing. So it's around what is you're trying to achieve and when is that going to happen. So is that a Christmas pop-up? Is that a summer pop-up? Is that a spring pop-up? Is that around a moment of a period? Is it Chinese New Year? Is it Valentine's Day? It could be anything. And I think, again, it kind of harks back into what visual merchandising is. It's about creating an experience, a visual experience around a moment. And that's kind of the joy of a pop-up, is that it creates physically a sense of a season. And I think that's, again, where I sort of talked earlier about how window displays have now evolved, and I think that storytelling, that creation of bringing a product and a sense of season to life has a new lease of life in temporary store environments, whether it's temporary through the activation, whether it's temporary through its delivery, but how you create this creative sense of the season, or the sense of the kind of the environment, or whatever it is, but it's got this real kind of richness to it. And then how can a pop-up be delivered? Well, again, look at all the examples from things like Dr. Martens to Comme des Garçons to Off-White. It's however you want to deliver it that kind of taps into the need of all those bits we've talked about. So where, when, how, what, it kind of what's true to your brand, what's true to the product, what's true to everything. So is it all natural? Is it recyclable? Is it about sustainability? Is it about popping up and disappearing overnight? Is it about blowing it out the water and doing something incredible? Is it just about simple graphic treatments? Is it it goes from the sublime to the ridiculous. I think another reason to love pop-ups is you can spend £500 to £500,000, but it's what you do with that budget and how you bring it to life. So it's about material choices, it's about usability, it's about application. It's kind of all of those things. It's about playing with all of those bits that you've got and bring it to life. And you can kind of see the far reaching, whether it's just some timber wrapped in kind of like cling, I've forgotten what that's called, but that kind of cling film wrap that's just so temporary, but that's a pop-up, through to what YSL do for their beauty. It kind of showcases the kind of far reaching sort of plethora of different consumer touch points. So whether it's made from OSB board or pine, it kind of doesn't matter. It's all about what it is you're trying to create. But I think most importantly, for all pop-ups and every conversation I have that we have at Wild, like underpinning any of that, and I think that this is the challenge with pop-ups and why a lot of brands, whether you're I think traditional brands, are really struggling to grasp what a pop-up is why. Why would you do a pop-up? And underpinning anything from a brand delivery of creating a pop-up has to be a reason to do, like, what is the reason you are creating this pop-up? So it's kind of understanding what those key deliverables are and creating an experience out of that. So what is it you're wanting to achieve? What is it, the measurables that are in place post pop-up, and how are you going to measure those? So why are you doing a pop-up? And I think that is a lot of struggles at the moment is depicting what that is, and that the most successful pop-ups are not about lots of different reasons. They are about creating one really strong message as to why this pop-up is happening. So for example, I posted, and I've seen other people post it, and this kind of was the pop-up for me of last year. So Gucci North Face pop-up, but it underpins a reason why. So there was a strong narrative. Obviously, it was to launch the collaboration. So it's around the North Face Gucci collaboration of products. So there was a really strong narrative there to create a pop-up. And then it was built into the Gucci pins, which is around activation in different areas and driving your consumer to a new space. So they could start to play with driving content and consumers in a new environment. So it could take place in a much temporary location. It was time limited. It was focused on the product and the collaboration. and it was all tied into that one thing. So the whole collection was brought to life in a pop-up space, and it kind of underpins there was a pure destination for that pop-up, for that collection, for that collaboration, and it was brought to life through its creativity. It was brought to life through its kind of branding and that cohesive message that was put into it. And obviously other things were brought into that. So the advertising, the creative, the Instagram, the kind of the technology behind it, about these sort of secret moments. So you would have to kind of discover them through downloading digital content. But it was a whole campaign that was thought around in terms of its physical delivery. Similar, I posted this yesterday, but this again goes to kind of underpin why, sort of how successful pop-ups can be. So Atmos in Tokyo have just launched a Nike Air limited edition collaboration, and it's all focused on convenience stores. So they've got a kind of fried chicken Nike trainer. It's not as horrible as it sounds, but everything is focused on this convenience. So there's like kind of bento box inspired packaging. So to kind of bring that to life physically, what better way to do it than to create a convenience store environment? So again, the whole collection is told within a story. So it's about bringing the story to life through the product display, through the consumer pieces that are there. So there's magazines in there, the pieces of art that have been created look like magazines. There is packaging, like I said, that goes in there, and then the products displayed obviously in kind of like supermarket or cold sort of cabinets. So it feels limited. It is limited because it's only there for a limited run. There's a reason to visit because it's by appointment only. The product is limited, so you have to bid to become an owner of a pair. So again, it's all super collectible. It's super of now. It's for the kind of fear of missing out generation, people who want to be photographed or be into sort of acting with it. They want to be part of it, and there's the sort of store destination that brings that to life. So the collection all happens online. It's not a collection you can buy in the store. So you can go in there, you can see it, but it's to bring a digital collection to life in a physical space. And again, that's a really important thing for the future of what pop-ups can be. So how can you bring your digital brand to life in a physical space? And again, this is a great example of how that can work. Bottega Veneta did this is a soundscape. So this is around sound. So this was about playing with kind of the senses. So it was around playing not only with the consumer in terms of selling to them, but it was about really playing with their senses. So they created their own sound through a collaboration with a sound artist. And it was about, again, engaging physically. So all those things that we've talked about that you can't do at home, we can all buy the product from them. But what you can't do is you can't become immersed in that. So this whole idea that they'd have this kind of like discoverable, inflatable cube that just sort of appeared overnight, that you would go in and you'd be immersed. And then what would happen to kind of tie into that was these sort of inflatable elements that would be put into the store next door, so that it kind of had a narrative between pop-up and physical retail. So the two things were working together. So outside the store was this weird kind of Instagrammable selfie space that you would just kind of just discover. And then if you went into the retail store, there would be these sort of messages, or like you can see there. So there's inflatable product display. So again, everything had this consistency, but without being kind of really shouty about it. And it just had a really nice narrative. And I think, again, that kind of highlights how you can add pop-ups into your traditional retail format. So they sit alongside what you're doing, so they don't have to stand alone. They can be kind of coherent in what you're doing. They can be completely off the radar, like some of the ones we've talked about, or they could be part of it. So there's a few examples of those as I sort of go through. This harks back to timing, but also underpins collaboration. So Gucci launched for Chinese New Year. I believe, I don't know if it's my speaking of it is Doraemon, but I'm not a big anime fan, although I love childlike, what's it called? Kidult stuff. So as you can see, probably from all the things behind me, so this kind of like really taps into my visual kind of look and feel of how I just love things that are colorful and in your face and oversized and cutesy and all that kind of stuff. So, but I just love this concept that Gucci is this kind of weird mashup of kind of all these different aspects. Who would have thought? I think it harks back to kind of the Gucci North Face, but who would have thought Gucci would start kind of putting this in? And I think it allows, pop-ups allow you to do this outside of your own traditional retail. So I think it allows you to create these kind of, like I always call them, these sort of mini moments that happen, and it doesn't detract from what's happening in, for example, in Gucci. How this happening in the mall doesn't detract from the kind of probably seriousness or the consumer they're trying to engage in their own physical space. So as you can see, that it had the collection. So it was a time limited collection. It was focused around a character or a product, a collaboration. It was about bringing that to life physically, and then kind of just immersing the visitor. So how can you do that through, obviously TikTok, but it's creating these spaces that people want to go in, as you can see, and be photographed in front of the character and kind of be part of that experience. So again, I sort of talk about we can all buy that collection online, and I imagine, but you don't get that. You don't become part of you're not part of the tribe. You're not part of the community if you just sit at home and get it delivered. And it kind of taps back into what I talk about Supreme, is that it all happens physically. Like, you have to be part of that activation, and the pop-up does that for like whatever you are, whoever you are, and whatever you're doing, and however much you're spending. It creates that sense of community, that buzz, that shareable content. It just does everything that I feel that retail really is calling out for going forward. So this kind of then highlights the kind of range of how you can move from kind of cutesy, cartoony, colorful, through to really considered, really kind of ornate, but again, show-stopping. That if you're in the mall, for example, and you would want to go in and see what that was all about. Like, it's beautiful, and again, it's just got this wow factor that you would want to explore it. You'd want to find out what was inside it. You'd want to touch it, like everything. You'd want to be part of that, and again, you'd want to photograph it. Everything becomes part of that Dior pop-up. And yes, it's intricate. Yes, it's kind of built, but the kind of the concept of it is that it's also something that can move around. It's modular, so it can kind of pop up in Asia. It can move to Dubai. It can go to America. Like the concept around it and the usability of it is kind of, it underpins the kind of use of it. So it always goes back to why. Like, why are you doing this pop-up, and what is it you're trying to achieve? So is it something that's just going to create a buzz for 2 weeks in one location, in one store, or an old store that you've got, or an end of lease store, or a pop-up space, or are you going to move it globally and tour it? So all of those things are important into the considerations for where you're at for a pop-up. Hermes, this is a wild project, but this kind of goes again to highlight how easy it is to kind of take a brand and bring it to life this was in an end of lease store. So this was a store that Hermes had kind of were not looking to continue to use, and they wanted to use it as a pop-up to focus on a campaign around recoloring Hermes scarves. So but it goes to show how kind of simple a pop-up can be. So it was built around a concept of scarves, of kind of laundering these scarves. But ultimately, the assets were the key driver into creating a pop-up. So pop-ups can be created out of anything. You know, you could create it from, for example, it was the colors of Hermes, and it was the idea of this kind of laundry that you would take your scarf in and it would be recolored. And rewashed and kind of re-dyed, so it would be given a new lease of life for you. And a whole pop-up was created from that. So again, pop-ups don't have to sit within a massive, wider campaign in terms of a delivery. They could be a very localized kind of activation, or it could be an activation that they're thought about on their own. But it's really sort of given that kind of identity and personality and all of those things into a pop-up space. Jack Wills is a pop-up I did. This was quite a few years ago, but again, kind of underpins all those bits that I was talking about at the beginning, where the kind of whole point of a pop-up, and this was a Christmas, was this stayed in Jack Wills' own retail store environment. So it was about reutilizing a store that was traded. But the underpinning of it all was how would you create the ultimate Jack Wills Christmas store? So it was all about the like if Jack Wills had a traditional or the ultimate traditional Christmas space with a twist, what would that look like? So we basically took over an entire store visually and turned it into a kind of a pop-up store. So if you were a Jack Wills fan, or you were really into like Christmas and you wanted to engage on a Christmas level, then this store would be the ultimate kind of Jack Wills Christmas store. So from candy cane kind of garlands that you would walk through and you could kind of Willy Wonka-esque pick them off and eat them as you walk around the store, to Christmas decorations that were all kind of tied into fitting rooms that were filled with snow, so you could go in them and have a snow fight with your friends and kind of Instagram yourselves in these weird sort of snow fitting rooms, through to kind of like tiny little consumer like touch points on mirrors, to kind of doorknobs, to Father Christmas coming down the chimney that was built into the store. And it was about utilizing the brand assets, the store, and the time of year. So it wasn't collecting based, it wasn't time limited around any kind of popping up for a collaboration or anything like that. It was around a seasonal pop-up. So it was popping up in terms of driving content and creating a platform. So again, things would happen in that store, from Christmas music, so Christmas gigs, Christmas, there was monogramming, there was mulled wine, there was various events and activations that would go on around that pop-up. And things like crackers and all those kind of things were built into the store, but it was around creating one space where the consumers would all engage with the season. And then one which again, a wild project we've done, but I just wanted to kind of throw this in because I've been showing mad examples of Hermes, people like Gucci, people like Dior, but this is a fantastic example of, again, Moyen is a sustainable online, very small online retailer that was looking to get into physical spaces in Bluewater. And the kind of whole purpose of this was how we could bring that brand to life by there's no brand assets apart from the photography, apart from things like sustainability. So really simple, but it kind of shows how you can go from as I said, really depends on what you're looking to do. The whole purpose around this was to get some brand engagement, was to drive in footfall on and consumer engagement on a new level, and really kind of put the brand out there physically. It's a brand because of the organic nature of the product. You want to touch it, you want to feel it. So it was how you got a sense of that in a new space, but also to create a platform for their photography going forward. So how could they use that not only for retailing, but as a space that they could do all their photography shooting and engagement on a social media level. So it was a multi kind of use store, but again, it was underpinning at the beginning of that conversation what the purpose of that store was. So just some kind of bits as I've been chatting on, again, as I normally do on these for 30 minutes. It feels like 30 hours, 30 minutes straight. And I will go back through everyone's comments in a minute. So, but as I said, pop-ups are all about providing a platform for your brand to communicate physically. That is ultimately what underpins it. So whatever you're doing, whatever your brand is, whatever you want to do, whether you're an online brand, whether you're a startup business, whether you're a traditional retailer, whether you are a car company, whatever you are, but it allows you to kind of communicate in the physical sense and in a new way, in a conversation. And they create relevant spaces that connect with your consumer in real life. And I think that's really important to understand, or to kind of think about in all pop-ups, is it's about being relevant. So again, there's no point creating a pop-up without a kind of key deliverable, a key kind of understanding of what you're trying to do, because it's so difficult to. Pop-ups can't be like they're not a one-size-fits-all policy, and they certainly can't be all things to all people. So again, if we could reference back to Gucci, for example, Gucci North Face and the Gucci Chinese New Year one, that is very specific around a very targeted audience at a very targeted time. So if Gucci were trying to bring their whole brand to life as a pop-up, it just wouldn't work. It's about relevant spaces and really honing down and connecting with your consumer in real life. So it's all about delivering a moment. My favorite word, my favorite phrase about retail or anything physical, and it's a time-limited reason to visit. So pop-ups have to be time-limited. I think if pop-ups sort of pop up and then stay there for a long time, then that's not a pop-up. That's a temporary store or a kind of store. So it's about it goes back to that why. So is it time limited around the product? Is it time limited around the events that are happening there? Is it time limited because it's going to pop up and disappear after 3 or 4 weeks and move to a different city or to a different country? So it's about delivering some, or is it going to change? There's no reason why you couldn't have a pop-up that does lots of different things. So like we talked about, it could be one thing for summer, and then all of a sudden it changes into the Christmas pop-up. It can evolve, but it has to evolve either and change to create that need to kind of visit and come back and revisit and be part of what's happening. And then I think the thing is, it's about being different. So if we've talked about traditional retailers and the kind of death of the high street, is because there's no differentiation like between what's happening on the high street. It's about being unique. If any of those examples that I've kind of highlighted, is they're all unique, they're all different, there's sort of not one thing. They're all doing different jobs. They all look different. Their build and their setup might be the same. There's a lot that are just built with four walls and a kind of entrance, so their kind of modular system is the same, but they're unique in their application and their usage and their kind of DNA. They're so unique. And if you ever Google pop-ups and look at Pinterest boards of pop-ups like I do, and kind of keep like read about things, they're all doing different things and trying to create a different piece, really. And I think underpinning everything about a pop-up, and hence probably why it goes back to tapping into that visual world, it is about being memorable. You know, I talked about going up to London and seeing windows when I was a kid, and I still remember those window displays, like the tradition, like going on that Christmas window tour it's still in my mind of kind of those that kind of visual excitement of seeing all those things. And I think that I get as excited now seeing the pop-ups that are happening and like things that I've shared on those examples as I did then, and they're memorable, they're vivid, they're colourful, they really grab your attention. And I think that is another thing that kind of is the champion for the pop-up, is it's about they can really be memorable, and they can kind of connect physically with a consumer in a whole new kind of conversation. So that's kind of my preach today on pop-ups. Again, if anyone's got any thoughts on them, I'm just going to quickly look through. There's lots here, so I'm just going into Neil, and I think Neil, you've put a great example there. I think there's a bit I didn't talk about was data, and I think that's a really interesting point, is around data. So what they allow you to do is gone from that playful bit in it, but that whole piece around if you think about the amount of data capture that happens on an online store, so the information you get out of Google Analytics and all those kind of things, pop-ups begin to allow you to build into that. So I know there's so many things, and it's a bit beyond my sort of technical brain, really, but how the data kind of, you can capture that the demographic, you can capture the where people are looking, you can capture obviously Instagram, all the kind of social interactions, and again you're bringing that content piece to life in a physical space. So I think, yeah, data and the use of those spaces to kind of be an importance back to a business is really important. I think it's especially important for online. So for online brands who want to go into the kind of physical world, they're so used to they build in these kind of brands on data. So it allows them to be nimble, reactive, kind of speed to market, all those kind of things. So definitely agree. Ian, Mr. Morgan from Wild, but I love the idea of shop in shop, pop up to champion a particular brand new lease. It doesn't have to be an entire store takeover. So true. I think in terms of brands, especially traditional retailers, and I think I've this kind of affection obviously for Topshop, but they would do it so well, is that they would have these kind of like mini stores within store. If you think about what 214 Oxford Circus used to be, it was the home for Topshop and Topshop's brands. When I went to Topman, we would split out the kind of brands and do these kind of like launches and launch different parts of Topman, for example, in different zones. So we would create, like they would have Topman Limited, but that would have its own pop-up within the store. So yeah, there's no reason why, even if you're a single like named retailer, you couldn't start to kind of tap into a whole new world in your own physical store, or you do something outside your physical store that engages. There's lots. Obviously, department stores can play on the pop-up vibe a lot more, but it's about kind of positioning your brand where your consumer is going to be. So there's no reason, and there's examples of things like popping up in art galleries, like to take your brand in where your consumer is going to be. The Tom Dixon example I had on the board was he put his new range of lights into the back of a van, and would drive it around New York so that they would be where the consumer would need to be. So I think as we become a lot more open to kind of exploring new places, and as we talked about the kind of evaporation from the kind of cities, that why could you not pop up in the park and all those kind of things. So there's so much to kind of consider in a pop-up, and that's why the why is so important, because until that's kind of understood, everything else is going to be quite diluted, and there's kind of no point doing a pop-up just for pop-up's sake, because it's really underpinning what it is you're trying to achieve, and whether that's to try something in a new market, whether that's to launch a new product, whether that's to talk about a collaboration, whether that's about to get people to socially share something, whether that's to move from an online only to a physical space. There's so much that can be brought into that. So I think it's all testing and learning and evolving. And as we've sort of spoken about before, the challenge with a physical retail store is it's so difficult to be kind of doing that, because it's very fixed, it's very expensive, and it's part of a kind of legacy estate. So it's kind of rethinking those kind of environments and bringing them to life. So that was kind of my 45-minute ramble on how to kind of pop up, or how to pop your brand. I don't know. I might, now the kids are back at school and I'm not doing algebraic formula and Joe Wicks and all those kind of things you do when you're teaching. So I don't know. I might come back on here. People have asked me where I've been, so I have kind of thought I'd come back. So if anyone has any thoughts, I don't know if I can do them every week. It got quite exhausting last year. So I'm sort of developing Zoom fatigue. So I don't know if anyone else is developing Zoom fatigue. I felt like a lot of people were talking about it yesterday. But actually talking to myself is probably better than having like 25 people on a screen. So if anyone has any thoughts on what we could talk about, if anyone, like we've talked about before, wants to come on again, let's kind of keep the conversation flowing, and we'll see you again soon. Again, if you want to drop me a note afterwards or keep in touch or anything, ping me a note on LinkedIn or anywhere. If what else was I going to say? I was going to say something else. Yeah, ping me a note on LinkedIn, and I can't remember what I was going to say. So it's I don't know. I've completely lost my train of thoughts now. So I better just say goodbye. So thanks everyone for being here, and I'll catch you all later. All right. Have a good